Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I have some interesting things to talk about today, among which I'm a little bit behind schedule, but that's because the last Pony Fantasy update was a little bit more editing intensive, and I wasn't saving as often as I should have, and then the editing software crashed, which happens a lot less frequently than it used to. For something about the way that I edit these days, it doesn't crash very often. But in any case, though, that kind of set me back a little bit, and we missed a day of counting merits. Kenza was not available to do her lines one day, and then Alan and I got some stuff, but then had errands to run, and I didn't get around to things. But in any case, though, I have my interesting story for the day, is I went to a BronyCon recently. I was not invited. I also didn't pay to go in. I actually just went down there and looked into the open doorways to see what they were doing. They were going to get like a game show, and playing pink fluffy unicorns dancing on rainbows, which you guys haven't seen that. That's just like an animation that someone has done with the pink fluffy unicorn who dances on a rainbow. So yes, I thought that it might be interesting to go down there with my download cards, because I got these things for Sweet Apple Acres Con, and that con bombed. And I thought to myself, what better place to just unload them than a convention for bronies. And unfortunately, though, it didn't pan out. I was going to ask, I wasn't sure if they're going to want them or anything like that, but I was going to see if I could talk to an organizer, and if they knew who I was, and I was going to be like, well, do you guys want like free download cards? You could just hand them out to anybody. And I thought that maybe they could take them from me, and they would be free, because otherwise, I mean, like, I don't really have a plan right now I was going to sell them for $4 at the con that we're going to go to, but also give them away for free to people who came to see us, and so I thought it'd be funny. I also had a USB, or not funny, fun. I also saw a USB, I had a USB drive with the raw, not fully completed version of episode 11 of the Mentally Advanced series. I had that in my pocket because it was just on a USB drive, and so that was easy to take with me. I didn't bring any recording equipment or anything like that, because the whole thing was all kind of a gamble. I found out about the convention through 4chan. And like I said, it was Midwest Brony Fest, and he goes, this is Midwest Autism Fest, and I went down there and I made eye contact with people, and they smiled at me and whatnot. So not a whole lot of honestly, it was dorky, but it's a convention, and like every convention that you go to, like with the fandom, you get people who are like really dorky for their fandom. So there were a lot of people in costume, and that was kind of neat. They were out in the field when I was there. And so I went upstairs and I took a picture of some interesting artwork that I saw, because the convention center is really pretty and it's decorated with a lot of art. So like I used the restroom upstairs, and then I went downstairs and I spoke to a girl behind a counter, and I said, do you know about Rainbow Dash Presents? And she didn't, so she directed me to a con organizer. And like I didn't pitch anything. I just said, are you familiar with? And she and she pointed me to another guy. And so I go to him and I'm like, are you familiar with Rainbow Dash Presents? And he goes, are you with Rainbow Dash Presents? And I go, no, are you familiar with Rainbow Dash Presents? Like he wasn't sure. I think he thought that maybe I was invited to the con, or I was with something or other. And so then he goes, no, I don't know what that is. And I go, oh. Okay, never mind then. And so that was kind of it. Like if they knew who I was, then I could have given them some stuff I could have like let them take that episode 11 and then do whatever they wanted with it. I didn't really have a plan to stay. I didn't know. I just thought like I said, it would be a good way to get rid of the cards, and they're kind of for promotional stuff anyway. I mean, they got my name on them and all that, so could write the website on them. So anyway, though, yeah, it was more promotional for me. So I just didn't think that I could like convince a guy. Like if they didn't know who I was, I didn't think I was going to be able to sit someone down and be like, okay. So I need you to watch the full body of my work, or just some parts of my work. Oh, the episode's about a half hour. Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't think that was going to fly. And then, of course, if they didn't know me, I also didn't think it would be a lot of effort to get them to be like, no, you can try. I've got this USB drive. Just let me put it in your computer. So, yeah. So I was there for like a half hour. Maybe not even that. I think I was only like, I don't know. I wasn't there for very long. I just kind of looked around, saw some pretty artwork, posted it on my Tumblr, and went home. And I was really hoping that maybe someone in that convention would see my Tumblr post. I don't have very many Tumblr followers, so like odds are really bad. But I was hoping that maybe someone would see it, and then they would go upstairs and look for the painting, and it would be like a really boring scavenger hunt. And I don't think it panned out that way. Yeah. But anyway, though, so question for today. Today, I had someone ask me, they're planning on going to engineering school, and they wanted to know what I think is a good idea to prepare for engineering school. And unfortunately, there's not really a whole lot that I could tell you, because everyone is a little bit different when it comes to school. I mean, after all, you probably learn in your own way, and you really don't need me to tell you specifically, like, make sure that you study all the material or whatever. That's one thing that bugs me about a lot of professors, is they get it in their heads that it's really just a matter of devoting the right amount of time. And that is simply not the case. I mean, everyone it's about devoting the right amount of time in the right way. And so you've got to know kind of how you learn. For me, I always really liked hands-on. Like, I like to just do things, trial and error, see if it worked. And when I hit a brick wall, it was when I got to thermodynamics. And that's another thing when you tell me, like, I'm going to be an engineer. I don't know what kind of engineer you're being. You could be, if you're going into, like, chemical engineering, you're probably going to get into quantum mechanics and thermodynamics, which was like the most, I don't know, it was the roughest spot for me when I was following that path. And quantum mechanics was frustrating just because it was so abstract. Like, almost everything they use is in the form of, like, really complex derivatives. And so I will have to say, if you don't love math, then maybe don't pursue engineering. In a lot of fields, you won't use as much calculus as you might think. In fact, actually, what you'll really want to know really well is linear algebra, the ability to use, like, matrix math and whatnot, and maybe to program a bit in Excel. It might be a good idea to study ahead of time a little bit of Visual Basic Advanced for Excel. Although, like, it's helpful, but the problem is that it's Microsoft software. And the problem with Microsoft is that they're compatible with nobody. I mean, like, they don't even read ODT files. So if you want to, like, use OpenOffice, which is free, Microsoft will refuse to recognize the ODT files. They won't read them. So, like, it's one of those things, it's a language that you can learn, but you can only use it with Excel. So it may help, it may not, but if you learn how to use Excel in such a manner that you can use all the matrix functions and whatnot, that can save you a lot of time. But the problem is that also too, you'll want to have to print off your spreadsheets and whatnot if your professor will allow it. That's one thing where I had one professor where I went through a lot of engineering stuff, statics and dynamics. They applauded my use of matrices, because it makes everything kind of a lot more organized, because you, like, lay out your equations and then you lay them out in a matrix, and then you can solve like 12 equations at once using inverse matrix functions, and it's very convenient. But, like, where one professor thinks it's a really good idea because of how much time it saves you and how clean it looks, another professor will just hate it, because how does he know that you know how to, like, do algebra on 12 simultaneous equations if you don't show every single step between, like, there and the answer? So you get these weird things. You have to know, kind of, like, is your professor, is he like neurotic and whatnot? And that'll be something that's actually really common, a really common problem. My thermodynamics professor was a little bit, he wasn't like neurotic, but he was a little bit insecure. You could tell that he thought that he was too smart to be teaching, I just went to a state college. I wasn't going to anywhere like Harvard. But you could tell that he thought that he should be at, like, Harvard. He wanted to go to Ivy League, and he was very strange about it. So he had this situation. Like I said, I like to learn hands-on, and when I went into thermodynamics, I found out that was very challenging to do if you don't have, like, a really good textbook. And I tried to special order some supplementary material, but it was, by the time I tried to order it, it was too late. Like, I realized that I was not doing well, and I needed to get a better form of education. And it just wasn't, like, it all came too late. It was too little too late, and that was a shame. My problem with that guy was that he had a textbook, and he made us use it not because it was a good textbook, but because he'd helped write the solutions to it, and he was very proud of the fact that he made a number of the solutions incorrect. So if you did the problems and then looked in the back of the book, you would get the wrong answer. And then if you tried to copy the answer in the back of the book, or you tried to solve to the back of the book, or if you started with the answer and worked your way backwards, he would know that you were, like, using the information in the back of the book, and he would give you a 0. And that was one thing he warned us. He had this list of all these things that were, like, academic misconduct. It just blew my mind. Like, as difficult of a subject as thermodynamics is. Like, this was advanced thermodynamics, mind you. This was not intro to thermodynamics. This was, like, full-blown, like, here we are, everything is like everything's a function of everything else, and there's, like, multivariable calculus, and and got like complex differential equations and stuff like that. It was tough enough to understand as it was. The fact that he forbade so many methods of teaching yourself, like if you could go online and find answers, or if you could get examples, and he didn't do examples in class, and the TAs would do like one example, because they would have like, we had these discussion sections, and so someone would say like, could you do like these difficult equations? And plus two, he would assign these problems that were hard. And so then he got an F average for his exam. He got something like a 50, and I got like a 30 on the first exam. And it was something like he was just patting himself on the back. And I remember how pissed I was, because up until that point, the math was always how I got by in classes. Like I was always like, I'm not very good with names and dates and stuff like that. Like you guys sometimes, if you ever listen to my rants, I'll be like, oh yeah, and I tell you like all this I'll dump all this information on you, but then not remember the names of the people that are involved. So I don't do really well with that, but I always do really well with the broader stuff and like understanding the math. And these are the patterns, and this is how it's all kind of applied. But for this exam that he did, he wound up. It was so frustrating. One of the problems you had to solve through iterations, and I don't mean like I'm talking like Newton's method kind of stuff. And normally like you wouldn't do that in an exam unless it was specifically to test Newton's method, because it's very tedious. Like it's guess and check. Like you do a number, and then Newton's method kind of helps you narrow down so that you don't have like a billion different trial and error things like that. So you've got, it's a calculus trick to solve this problem. And you go into this exam and you have like 1 hour to complete 2 problems, and then there's like 20 things that you would need to memorize. Like these are whatever. And like I said, I don't memorize names very well, and so I didn't have the memory section. It didn't come out very well. And then the math section was just hopeless. Like I got some credit in it, but most of it was just I kind of like I said, the average was an F, and so that's tough. So yeah, a lot of times like you might be frustrated to find out that certain aspects of your education in college, for as much as you spend, might be left a lot to luck. You'll get some professors that are really good, like I had professors that were just phenomenal, and then you might get professors who are really terrible, who actually feel like you're wasting their time, who don't like that you're there making them, teach you, because they think you should teach yourself. They don't want you to, if I teach you, then, you haven't learned. They just get this weird mentality where they think if you don't discover it on your own time, then you haven't really learned anything, because I told you, I told you how to do thermodynamics, and now that you know, it's not valid knowledge. So you might get into weird stuff like that. So that's one thing to be cautious of. Always make sure, whenever you get into a class, especially if people are warning you about it, like thermodynamics or quantum mechanics, or advanced differential calculus was kind of trippy. Probability is actually going to be really strange for you. That's one that's very difficult to wrap your brain around because it's so abstract. But if you have to do a class on probability, do invest on supplementary texts that will show you in a simplified manner how to get to a solution. Because those books won't screw around with you. They're not made by a professor who's trying to make sure that you don't get an A or whatever. He's not trying to curve your grade or anything like that. They're just trying to show you how to do the problems. So those supplementary texts are often a good idea if you like that kind of thing. Otherwise, you might have to find other stuff to do. Figure out, do you need to be part of a study group? Actually, that's probably one of the other good things. Because the guys who were cheating in that thermodynamics class they all passed. And when I say cheating, I mean that some of them had passed exams, and this thermodynamics professor had made it academic misconduct to read his past exams, whereas some professors will just make them available. So when I say cheating, I don't mean that people are maliciously passing around answers and that they're gonna be blatantly obvious about it. I mean some people, it's gonna turn out you might meet a guy who took the class last year and then dropped out, and he's got all the exams. And it turns out that this professor who hates all his students never updates his exams. And you can study those, and you'll get an idea of just how ridiculous that the whole thing will get. And yeah. So I never, that was one of those things, I was in a study group for a little while, and they kind of brought up the whole thing. And I didn't specifically have a moral objection to what they were doing, because the class was so ridiculously insane. But I think I was working at the time, and that's another thing you need to think about. Do you need money? If you do, you know, like there's not a lot you can do, but work takes up a lot of your free time, and you might need that to study. But anyway, though, I couldn't meet with them very frequently, and so when they had the exam, like I was working, and I didn't get to look at the exam, and so that test totally blindsided me, where it didn't these other guys. Like, they were like, oh, we're gonna have to solve with iterations, like, is that crazy or what? And yeah. So yeah, do join study groups. You'll get the social stuff you'll find is probably more important than, like I say, it'll reduce your odds of being unlucky, because you'll find people who know about the professors more intimately, and who also have access to like past things, even if maybe they're technically not supposed to. I'm not saying to cheat, like don't actually do something that would get you thrown out of college. It's not a good idea. But if your professor is not teaching, it's gonna be an uphill battle. And if it's like ambiguous, then what can I say? Use your own judgment. You might regret it. I mean, think about spending $40,000 and then failing, like in the last stretch, because your professor decided that you needed to solve this problem with iterations rather than by understanding the concept. So yeah, the main threat to him was time. Remember how proud he was of that too. He got up there, he goes, I couldn't even solve these problems within the time that you guys had. It was unbelievable. I wanted to slap this guy. So yeah, that was the first time that I dropped out of college, in fact, too. And then of course I came back later, and wound up just I couldn't, the stress was worse the second time. It's harder coming back than it is, so just stick it out. That's the other thing. It's harder coming back. Most people will tell you that, so you probably shouldn't leave. Yeah, other than that, make sure that you got a really stable living situation. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to have people like come and go, and so you're all worried about rent and finances and everything else. For 4 years, I lived with my girlfriend, actually, and so that was nice and stable, and that was probably the best 4 years of my college that I had, because I had someone there all the time who I could kind of like talk to and whatnot. And actually, my grades started to get a little bit bumpy when she and I started to fight a lot. And when my social situation got turned upside down, then things got really stressful. It got really difficult to focus on my classes, you know. And then she moved out, and then I had to start looking for people to like replace the room, because I had to take care of there was a lease, and so I had to get someone in there. And then another guy showed up, you know, and then he stayed for a little while, and then he abandoned the place, like all at once. He just tells me, he goes, hey man, I'm leaving at the end of the month. And so that was really frustrating. And then I found the new place, and I moved around a lot. And so that's not good either. If you get into that kind of situation, it's kind of a death sentence, or it can be, for your college. So make sure your situation is stable. It's not necessarily a bad idea to stay with a girlfriend, but if you guys are both young, like, I mean, we were 18, you know, is when we got out of college. Or, well, I was 19, she was 18. It's a little bit young to be moved in together. It's not bad. Like I said, we made it for 4 years, but when things go sour, normally, I mean, you know, you'd think that 4 years would be pretty good, but just if things go sour, things can get kind of rough. So you might, like I say, just make sure you've got a nice stable situation. Stay with friends, stay with guys who are dependable. Don't take a risk if you feel like maybe you're going to stay with someone who you can't rely on, like you know that they, I mean, like, think if they smoke a lot of pot, and they're anything except for like an English major or a business major or like a religious studies, if they do anything that isn't like just worthless, like if the degree is not virtually worthless, and they smoke a lot of pot or they do a lot of drugs, you probably don't want to get a room with that person, because that person's going to be dropping out of college pretty soon. Because you can experiment. Like, everyone I've known actually who messed around with drugs in college eventually dropped out. That's not to say that everyone who you know did that kind of thing dropped out, but I didn't know anyone who made it. So I recommend don't get mixed up in that stuff, because that's the other thing that's like, I don't know, it just like, it screws you up. I wouldn't recommend drinking too much either. A lot of guys party too much. They like go out every night and they drink too much. I became an alcoholic, when I am in college, I drink because of the stress. It was worse the second time around. I was drinking a lot, and then I quit again. So that's one that's really like, you know, I can tell you it's stressful, because I drank a lot when I was in college the first time, and then I got out of college, and I pretty much just quit drinking. Like, I didn't have any alcohol around the place. I kind of just stopped. I think that was actually around when I met Kenza. She asked me if I could stop, and so I just did. I'm one of those lucky people. I can kind of do that sort of thing with my habits. And but then I went back to college, and I was like, wow, this is really stressful. I could probably use a drink. And then I started drinking again. And then now I've left college again, and now I've basically just stopped drinking again. So what can I say? But the drinking doesn't really help because it screws up your senses and it makes it harder to do your work. Like, you really need that time to just be doing stuff, and that's the thing that sucks, is you're constantly just bombarded with work. And so it's not good. If you have a job, it's not always good. So, about going to college, that's kind of my recommendation for you. It's not, what can I say, it's not the most ironclad recommendations. They're not the most solid thing that I could possibly help you. But unless I know you personally, and if I knew specifically what you were trying to pursue, I might be able to give you more information. I might be able to recommend maybe some good resources for you. But unfortunately, just in the general sense of going to college, it can be rough. But if things get too bumpy, you could always switch your major over to, like I say, English. Or business is probably more like, at least a business degree, like other business degrees will respect that. So you could switch over to business. And yeah. So just try to get some kind of degree, because a lot of places require you to have a degree to get promoted. So you got to get something. Although right now the job market's not so great. I've read about like 60% of people my age have degrees, and the number one most popular job for people my age is retail work. So on the average, getting a degree is not helping a lot of people, although I don't know how many of those degrees, it didn't divide up what kind of degrees are doing what. Some degrees are better than others. Pharmacy, for example, was doing really hot, but I wouldn't recommend it now because a lot of pharmacies are kind of trying to pinch pennies, and so the sign-up bonuses aren't quite where they used to be, and there's really squeezing so that you don't have as much help at the times that you need it. Bonuses are starting to become non-existent in some companies. It's a stressful job. It's got more ladies in it, you might meet some ladies in pharmacy, but that's not really a good reason. That's not a good reason to invest your entire life into pharmacy. You'll find ladies in a lot of professions these days. So, yeah. So that's all I can recommend. I hope it's helpful, or at least get you a little bit thinking about college stuff. It's really all I've got today, so I will catch you guys later.